welcome to a very special episode of our vlog at Eureka Languages. Today we're in Singapore and I have a very special guest with me today here, Dan. And why don't you introduce yourself to our viewers, Dan, please?
Hi, I'm Dan. I'm from UK originally, been here in Singapore for 12 and a half years. Actually a speech coach, and I go around all the different schools here in Singapore teaching phonetics, public speaking, drama, debating. So, if you're interested in these sort of things, improving the way you speak, I'm the man to call.
So tell us a little bit more about the concept of Angmohdan and why you felt that there was a niche in the market for services like yours, and perhaps a bit about how you got started.
Well, sure. I mean, Angmohdan is really the website that I concentrate all my observations and everything that I've learned in the schools. Now, as a consultant, I go to different schools helping and showing students the correct way of maybe speaking, giving them confidence to speak. The reason I started this website is really to give my experience and my knowledge a wider platform and to make it a lot more fun than I necessarily feel that, say, people like, well, I can't really name names, but other institutions that do try and help Singaporean students, adults with their English, but they seem to be quite serious with what they do.
So tell me about some of the more fun activities that you would use to engage your students during a workshop.
Well, definitely it's drama. I mean, confidence, group work, bringing people together, not being isolated in front of a crowd of people. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to help them gain confidence first, because public speaking especially is the number one fear for everyone on this planet. And to stand up in front of people, especially if you're not very confident in the way you speak initially, is something that we're trying to help the students overcome.
So is it purely a question of having the confidence to communicate and stand up and say what you really mean? Or is it more a question, because a lot of people are thinking, is it simply saying the rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain? Do you have that focus on diction and pronunciation? Or is it more about just, hey, let's have fun, let's have a drama workshop and express yourself?
It is progressive. I mean, we have to start somewhere. We have to start with confidence building. And then if students wish to either improve themselves in their diction and the way they speak, because it's all about oral communications at the end of the day, it's be able to be understood by a wider audience. So definitely we start with very simple confidence building activities, fun, group work. But then, later on we'll step into the phonetics, which incidentally is taught at a very young age, but forgotten in the teenage years. When I noticed this, I was quite shocked because some bad habits crop in. The phonetics side is really useful for them to have a technical appreciation of some of the commonly mispronounced sounds that I've spotted here.
And here's the thing I was wondering about the process and the kind of relationship you have with the students in the school, because they come for an Angmohdan workshop, they have great fun, they learn lots of useful things, and then they go back to their friends and their family, and then everyone thought like that, because they live in Ang Mo Kio, they live in Choa Chu Kang or Toa Payoh, and everyone thought like that, and then they think, why talk like Ang Mo? And then say, oh, because Angmohdan teach us to talk like Ang Mo. And then within, I don't know, hours, or maybe even if you're lucky, days, everything that you have taught them would be undone in due course. How do you deal with that challenge?
So I go back to schools year upon year, and definitely if I'm only doing 6 weeks in a school for a particular set of students, when I go there next year, a lot of things have been forgotten. Now, this is peer pressure. The students will leave my workshop, they know how to pronounce tuition, they will say tuition, and then their friends, tuition, and so why you talk like that? And they're going to be embarrassed because all their peers know it one way, and they're saying it the correct way, but not being understood by their peers. I still find it a joy when students will come up to me at the end of the lesson and reel off a load of words and say, how do I say this? And I still get that, even though I'm conscious of the fact that if they do say it properly, they might get mocked.
Do you consciously try to correct their mistakes? Or do you think that, no, we're going to look at the wider picture of communicating effectively and confidently?
I will say definitely with certain words, commonly mispronounced words, and actually I've spotted commonly mispronounced sounds.
Yeah.
So actually I don't have to teach all the words, I just say it's that sound that you need to fix, and that will then help you with 100 words.
At this point, I'd like to bring in another one of our language experts here. We're very lucky to have Kai Askari from Finland with us today. Please sit down, Kai. Like myself, you're a linguist who speaks, you're a polyglot. You speak many languages, like 10 languages. And you've had a lot of experience in Finland dealing with teaching, particularly with the teaching of the Swedish language in Finland. And the question that I would like to pose indeed both to you, Kai, and to you, Dan, is should we be spending more time, energy, money, and effort perfecting the way we speak English? Or should we actually be spending all that on learning more foreign languages? So Kai, would you like to perhaps share this from a Finnish perspective? Because Finland is such a multilingual country.
Well, Finland is also a very small country with 5.5 million people. So
Which exactly is the same population as Singapore.
Singapore,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. So definitely my answer would be that you have to be able to speak English, but that's only the basics. That's where you start. Then you should be building up your competence with other languages as well. Because if you want to make a career in international spheres, let's say in the Nordic countries, you have to be able to speak Swedish. You cannot make a career in English. If you want to sell something, you need to be able to speak the language of the countries you are selling to. And for example, in Finnish case, the most important countries where you export products are Sweden, Germany and Russia. That means you need to be able to speak either Swedish, German or Russian.
Or ideally, all three.
Of course, yes, but you can purchase things in English,
Yeah.
but you cannot sell them in English only.
And Dan, what about you from the perspective of should we be learning more foreign languages or should we be focusing more of our efforts in learning English because that's where the commercial value is, that's what the language of business is?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. English is still the top language for business, for education. I'm very aware that there has to be communication that is understood and not misunderstood. So you have to have a certain level of competency in this language. Growing markets in the region, China, learning Mandarin is also very important. So in a way, you have to have a few languages under your belt.
Going back to the topic about the way Singaporeans speak English, I would like to bring in a very old friend of mine, Vernon. Vernon and I were in VJC together. Please. Hi. Now, what I would like to talk to you about from a very Singaporean perspective is the fact that you were born and bred in Singapore.
Yes.
You've never studied abroad. You studied in US.
Yes.
And you've always worked in Singapore.
Yes.
Yet you don't have a particularly strong Singaporean accent. In fact, the way I describe your English is received pronunciation. It's very standard international English that's perfectly clear and very easy to understand. Now, why do you speak English this well? And is there a certain aspect of your education which you can say, oh, it's because this English teacher taught me this. That's why my English doesn't have a strong Singaporean accent.
I was lucky. I went to some really good schools and we were taught by Indian teachers who were in the service for decades. They insisted that we go through lists and lists of words and write them in IPA.
Okay.
Some teachers would actually recommend that you listen to half an hour of BBC radio a day.
BBC World Service, available in Singapore.
Yes. So I suppose part of my schooling has to do with the way I end up speaking English.
Do you think that sometimes the students have a very strong accent or they do not communicate particularly well because of the teachers? Because the teachers are not teaching English well enough or properly in Singapore. Have you ever encountered bad English teachers, for want of a better word?
You talk the way you want to talk, accents come about from a slight change in a vowel sound. Okay. Now, you don't be conscious of the fact that you got to sound like an American, a British, Australian. That's not what it's all about. It's clarity. It's making sure that the vowel sound is correctly pronounced and it isn't swayed or extended or stretched or made short. You talk how you want to talk, but make sure that your vowels are clear and your consonants, of course. You know, TH sound, for example, is
That's a pet hate of mine.
is something. Now, in terms of teachers, English teachers that I've come across are fine. There's nothing the way that they speak is affecting the students. It's outside influences, family. It could be other friends.
When does an accent turn a word into a mistake? So, for example, when someone says this and that, which is a very common Singaporean pronunciation, instead of this and that, where do you draw the line and say, okay, that's a mispronunciation?
I will do tests on students in terms of their friends saying a series of words that sound like other words. If you accidentally say, you know, a TH becomes a D, or the vowel sound. You stretch a vowel, you keep a vowel short. Ship, sheep, this sort of thing. Now, I do a series of word tests. See, you misunderstood that word to be that word. But more importantly, because our brains have the ability to look at context, we don't just do single words, we do sentences. So if you've got a sentence and you mispronounce one word, will I still be able to understand what you're talking about? And I highlight the fact that if you even have a sentence and pronounce one word wrong, you get a completely misunderstood idea from the speaker, which could eventually lead on to something else. A dangerous action could be brought forth because of a misunderstanding.
And Vernon, I'd like to move on to another common issue that we often mention in Singapore, and that is of code switching. Why do you find that some Singaporeans are able to code switch very effectively? Say, for example, between us, if we want to just switch like that, we can immediately talk in English and then you can understand.
Can.
Singlish can also can inside. Yeah, but then because here got so many Angmohdan, see got Kai, got our cameraman also Angmo. Yeah, then boom, we can switch right back to standard English.
But if they can understand, we also can jump with them, right?
Can lah. I don't. But Angmohdan here in Singapore so many years already, so surely in Singlish boleh lah. Can lah. Can.
Can.
Yeah. So why do some Singaporeans code switch so effectively, but others just can't?
Well, to be able to code switch, you need to respect the validity of each code you're switching to. And some people just don't see the viability, or they don't see that they need to respect a certain code. So they will never speak like an Angmo because, I'm proud to be Singaporean.
Kenapa lah Angmo ah? Why you talk Angmo?
Yeah.
Eat kantang is eat potato ah?
What my friends will all make fun of me.
That's peer pressure.
That's peer pressure, like what Dan said.
Yeah.
Or conversely, of course, I am so proud of myself. Why should I speak like some commoner?
Oh. Okay, and now I'm going to interview another expert, my friend Kevin Zhang. I'm going to let him introduce himself, please. Tell us about your academic background.
Okay, I did my bachelor and masters of arts in English literature in National University of Singapore, and after that I went to the University of Calgary in Canada to finish my PhD in English, and after that I was teaching in Japan for about 2 to 3 years as an English professor of English. Yes, and in one of the public universities before I came back to Singapore. So
your area of expertise is English literature.
yes.
So the question I'd like to pose to you is whether it's possible to become an expert in English literature but have a non-standard accent.
I believe it's possible because, when you're talking about studying literature, you're studying the books, what is being written. So technically you could, read the books, understand what they're saying, but you could speak with a different accent from everyone else. Everyone asks me, like here in Singapore, what do you speak differently?
Okay.
And then even in America or Canada, oh, you kind of speak like us, but you're not like us. So.
Is it a question of snobbery?
I believe that there's an element that that there's a kind of perception that there must be a standard. For example, when I was in Calgary doing my PhD, most of the students were generally very neutral towards my accent. They just told me, "Oh, slow down a little bit. We can catch up with you. You speak too fast, and we don't lose track of you." But there are some particular students who will be very picky about your accent. Oh, he speaks with a different accent. Like some of the words he pronounces, we know what he's saying, but it's different. And they do, it does come across in the evaluations. And I mean, on certain occasions when I look at the evaluations, I would be asking friends and even my advisors. And the common remark that was being raised was that, oh, actually, it's not your fault, and it's actually some particular perceptions that people must speak in a particular accent to convey that the method or the means to understand that text.
And I think it's quite interesting that you've actually worked in Japan for how many years?
2.5.
2.5
yeah,
years.
My experience. The Japanese aren't exactly very good in their comprehension skills or even listening skills to begin with. So it doesn't really matter whether you speak with a Singaporean accent or like a Canadian or American accent.
Given the fact that clearly they're struggling with English as a foreign language, would it facilitate your communication with the Japanese to be able to speak in a very clear, American accent, if you like, because that's the kind of English that they're used to from movies, from music, from TV programs. Would it have? Am I being perhaps a little bit more biased towards an American accent, or do you think it doesn't matter based on the experience?
I don't think it actually matters because the Japanese themselves. Most of the Japanese don't really care.
Oh, I'd like to get your perspective on this as well, Dan, in terms of being able to communicate with non-native speakers of English. So, for example, if I were to go to Brazil, or if I were to go to Russia, or if I were to go to Egypt, we would just default to speaking English to communicate with the locals. Would having a more neutral international brand of English, would that help facilitate communications in that kind of scenario?
I would have to say yes, but what do we call neutral? I'm actually leaning more towards an American accent in terms of how I feel would be a neutral language. Because some of their sounds are very emphasized, and it makes it clearer as to what word they're trying to say.
So now I'm just going to finish by introducing one of the other founders of Eureka Languages, Rob, who is also with us here in Singapore. Please sit down, Rob. Rob, you have been to Singapore, I believe, a total of 9 times, and you are quite used to hearing the way Singaporeans speak English.
Yeah.
Now, have there been any circumstances where you really struggled to understand Singaporeans?
It's a sliding scale. I really don't have many problems understanding Singaporean accents or Singlish, as long as it's spoken loudly enough, really.
Loudly?
Well, no, there's situations when people are sort of being
Mumbling?
quiet and mumbling.
Yeah.
And if you know the language very clearly, you can still pick it up, you can still decipher it because your code skills are better.
Mm-hmm. But what I think is going on here is when they see you're clearly white and foreign, they would, as Vernon said, code switch and try their very best to accommodate their English in a way that would be easily understood to you. Now, my question is, if you were to overhear a conversation I would have with Vernon in epic Singlish, would either of you be able to understand what we're saying?
I think I would understand some of it, but obviously in Singlish you also throw in words from Hokkien, from Malay, wherever they come from. And those words I won't understand.
What about you, Dan?
I agree with Rob there. It's more, Singlish is more than just an accent. It's the vocabulary, the use of words that you say from different dialects, plus grammar in terms of switching up a bit, switching it around. To this day, if somebody was having a conversation, as you said, there would be points I would be losing it, and I'd have to really concentrate on every single word. So I can, as you said, I can look at the context of what they're talking about, rearrange the words in my mind, and think, that's what they're talking about. But it takes a lot of concentration.
Yeah, it does take some concentration because the language is different.
It is.
And the way things are used and the phrases that you use are different.
Okay.
And it's not just the rearranging the sentence into sort of Chinese grammar order.
Yeah.
You actually end up using completely different vocabulary for some things.
Okay. That concludes our very special interview from Singapore. Don't forget to check us out on eurekalanguages.com if you wish to find out more about learning foreign languages. And if you are intrigued by what Dan talked about,
why don't you check out my blog / website at Angmohdan, that's ANGMOHDAN.com.
Okay, thank you. Bye.